Hey, welcome to the Newbie Real Estate Investors Podcast. My name is Joey Chan, and this is my co-host, Jonathan Boyle.
And today we're here at the Kovat Real Estate and Insurance School interviewing Kyle Kovats. He is a real estate salesperson, educator, syndicator, investor, you name it. And please stay tuned. Hey, Kyle, so quick question. How'd you get started in real estate?
So we're at Kovats Real Estate School here in 1973. My grandfather Frank started this school. He was involved in property management for a number of years. And after property management, he had started teaching real estate part-time, and then in 1973 decided to open up Kovats Real Estate School. So he had never been involved really in the brokerage side of the business, but he had the real estate school, he had taught the class. So when I turned 18, it was my summer after high school. I really had nothing much else going on besides landscaping work. So I decided I would get my real estate license. Got my real estate license, started doing it part-time in college while I was at Rutgers. And after I graduated, just decided to kind of dive in full-time to the brokerage side of the business. And then from there, just started doing more and more subdivisions, flips, syndications, you name it pretty much. Any little aspect of real estate I've pretty much had some kind of part in at one point in time or another.
Oh, wow. So you've been in the industry for over a decade at this point.
Yeah, about a decade. Yeah.
Wow. So since that's everything that you've done now, or I mean before, like what do you focus on now?
So my main focus is three things. So number one, we still have the real estate school here. So I teach here at Kovats Real Estate School. Number two, real estate brokerage activities. So I predominantly represent buyers and sellers in the suburbs of Essex County, specifically really the West Essex area in particular. And number three, I focus on acquiring large apartment complexes, 50 to 200 units typically, and we syndicate those mostly in two states, in Texas, in particular Dallas, Fort Worth area, as well as Phoenix, Arizona.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Can you, so let me ask you a few questions into each subsection, these three subsections. So first one, let's do the school. How many teachers do you have here at the school?
We basically have three teachers. I teach pretty much all the real estate salesperson's classes. We have a teacher who teaches the broker's class, and we have a teacher who teaches the insurance class. Majority of our business, 90% plus of it, revolves around real estate, and the large majority of that is the salesperson's class, which I 100% handle.
Okay, awesome. What's the name of the brokerage, number one? And I guess you're the owner, or are you the broker? Because there's distinction.
So my license with Keller Williams Suburban Realty in Livingston.
Okay.
So I am not the owner or the broker there.
Okay.
I operate as a salesperson there.
Okay.
So I specialize in just residential suburban sales in the suburbs. My six main towns, I would say, are Roseland, Essex Fells, Caldwell, West Caldwell, North Caldwell, and
Okay.
Fairfield. Also do Cedar Grove, Verona, Livingston. So I would say those are like my top 9 towns.
Okay.
So again, predominantly the West Essex area. I mainly just look to work with any buyers and sellers in those areas. I work with people who do 2 families, 3 families, 4 families, but the large majority, the bulk of my business is just single family home sales for end-use buyers for the most part. I've bought some stuff myself, represented myself in buying some stuff to flip and things like that as well. But 90% plus of my business revolves around just single family home sales in the suburbs.
Cool.
So I had a quick question then. As far as the brokerage side of things, when you got started at 18, can you go over maybe like the first deal you ever did? Like if you remember maybe some issues you may have faced?
Yeah.
Like a funny story or something?
Yeah, so I have a couple really funny stories from dealing in Hoboken. So if anybody's familiar with like the rental market in Hoboken, it is the absolute Wild West. It's just like a listing comes on the market on like a Thursday, and you don't even have to lie to people at all. You could just tell somebody it's going to be gone by Saturday, and that's the truth in a market like that. So in Hoboken, I remember the first deal I ever did, I had got my license, and when you get your license, it usually takes a state like 10 to 14 days to send it to your broker, so you're kind of sitting around waiting for that license to come in. So just, was kind of learning those 10 to 14 days how I was going to do rentals. At the time I was in college, rentals were quicker, they were simpler, they were easier, and it was quicker money. So for me, it was a lot easier to do rentals and sales, and that's what I focused on. So when I first got my license, it came in on like a Thursday. I placed an ad on Craigslist for a listing that my office had, and I got my phone ringing off the hook, and I was like, this is unbelievable. This is so easy. So, the thing that I didn't do is I didn't pre-qualify anybody. I would take anybody and anybody out at that time. So, but that Saturday, I took these two girls out who had just graduated from Duke, and they were engineers, and showed them a railroad-style apartment, a 2-bedroom in Hoboken on 2nd, and they said, hey, how soon do you think this is going to move? I said, honestly, I'm not bullshitting you. I think this is probably going to move by like tomorrow. And they're like, so how do we get this? I was like, well, we put in an offer. So long story short, we go back to my office to draw up the offer. I had no idea how to draw a lease. So I asked my broker, in a very busy brokerage on a Saturday, peak rental season in Hoboken, I said, what do I do? I went to the back of his office. I told the girls, I was like, hey, just wait up here real quick. Went to the back of the office, and he was like, the lease agreements are in that drawer, just fill it out, and that's it. I was like, I don't know how to fill it out. He's like, you'll figure it out. I was like, shit. So anyway, if you ever read through a standardized lease agreement with somebody, it takes like 3 hours when you read all that jargon and they ask you questions. Yeah. Well, as time goes on, you realize these are standardized, just regular generic documents. You don't have to read through every line with somebody. So that took 3 hours. Probably the craziest story I had from that summer, my first summer in the business, is there was this one bedroom that my office had listed for rent. It was $1,600. It was on like 2nd and Monroe, which is a little further from the path than people want to be who are commuting to the city. Yeah. So this guy had contacted me about it. He wanted to see it, so I take him out to see it. He's like, all right, I'll take it. Go back to the office. At this point, I know how to draw up leases now, and it's a lot quicker. So I draw it up. I tell him, hey, $1,600 a month, 12-month lease. Security is going to be a month and a half. Blah blah blah. I said, we just need you to fill out a rental application. So he fills out this rental application, and on our rental application, it says, what is your gross monthly income? And people would always mistakenly put their annual there. So he put $80,000. So I said to him, I said, hey, that's actually your monthly, not your annual. And he said, no, I know, it's monthly. I said, you put 80,000, and he said, I know. I said, so your gross monthly is 80,000, and he said, yeah. I said, well, if you don't mind me asking, do you want me to show you something else? Because I could show you something nicer in a better location that's a little bit more expensive, but I think you could probably afford it. And he was like, no, this is nice. I said, well, would you consider maybe buying something? Because I was, in my head, I was like, I ran the numbers quickly in my head. I'm like, this guy makes close to $1 million a year, and he wants to rent something for $1,600 a month. Something's not adding up. Yeah. So, and then I look at his rental application. He has this company listed, and the company is in Colombia, the country. Oh. So I always tell the story in class. I'm thinking in my head, this guy's making $80,000 a month, Colombia. All right, sketchy. Maybe he's involved in some kind of like drug trade or something. That I don't know about. So. And then it got sketchier. He was like, and by the way, I want to pay all cash up front. I want to pay the entire year's worth of rent in cash up front. Don't want to use a checkbook. He wanted to use actual cash. I wanted to pay the security in cash, not even a checkbook. Because when we hear cash as realtors, usually it means a wire transfer or a check, certified funds. He wanted to actually pay cash. So now I'm thinking, Colombia, $80,000 a month. Guy makes like $1 million a year, wants to pay everything in all cash. I was like, this guy's a drug dealer. That's my immediate thought process. So. Anyway, long story short, I keep asking him questions. I was like, cash, like, why can't you just do a check? He's like, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. He was like, I have a penthouse in Manhattan with my wife. He's like, I want a place away from her that she doesn't have to know about so I can do other things there. I was like, all right, I'm done asking questions now. So, but that was like, I was 18 years old, 19 years old, whatever I was at the time. And I remember that happened, and I was like, wow, this is, there's some crazy stuff you come across. Now, I thought that first year in Hoboken was going to be like every deal that I did, but you just learn, after I moved out to the suburbs and started doing my business out there, that things are a little more calmer, smoother, and not as like active there. Things move a little bit slower in the suburbs. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely had some crazy experiences for sure in my first year. But it was good. I was part-time in college, and I was making anywhere between $500 to $2,500 a week. Part-time as a college student. So helped me pay my off-campus rent, pay for food. Start paying down my student loans. I was able to pay those off in full within 6 months after graduation. Due to making money through real estate. So. Yeah, very, very, very fortunate to have done that, because I had to take out all student loans when I went to college, and luckily I went to a state school, so I didn't have like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I had like 50 grand worth of student loans. So definitely helped me pay those off quickly.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
pretty nice.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, so we're gonna jump into the next, segment, which is, you talked about syndications. Could you explain syndications to the audience a little bit?
Sure.
What that is? Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what a syndication is, it's kind of the best way to explain it. It's a big partnership. That's all it is. So maybe you have like two guys who are partners, like you two are partners in a deal. A syndication would be like you two are the general partners, and then you guys want to take down like a $10 million purchase, and you need $3 million in equity to take down that purchase. So you two are going to lead that deal, and then you're going to find investors to come into that deal. You guys will put up some money. The majority of money, though, is going to come from your limited partners or passive investors. So really, just to simplify what a syndication is, it's really just a very large partnership comprised of general partners who go out, they find the deal, they put it together, do the due diligence, they put together and they hire the attorneys to draw up the SEC compliant documents and syndication documents and things like that. And then the limited partners, all they're doing is they're just putting money into the deal, and they're getting a piece of the action too. So let's say, for example, we're presenting a syndication opportunity to some investors. We might say it's going to be a 10% cash-on-cash return annually and an 18% average annualized return over a 5-year hold. What that would mean is that if a limited partner put $100,000 into it, they could expect to get about $10,000 back per year. And then if we say like an 18% average annualized return over let's say 5 years, that would mean that they put $100,000 in, they got $10,000 back a year in cash flow, and by the time the property sells, the property is now appreciated in value, and the other 8% on top of that 10% would come from the appreciation at time of sale.
Right.
And also in a syndication, everybody shares. So typically the general partners who go out, they find the deal, put it together, they get what we call carried interest. It's like a split. So it'll be like typically a very common one's a 20-80 split. The general partners will take 20% of the cash flow, depreciation as for tax purposes, appreciation, at time of sale, and limited partners will take 80% of that based on their percentage of ownership. So that's the gist of it, and really what the basics of a syndication is.
Now, in regards to those syndications, do you typically go for, let's say, the 50 unit or 100 unit, bring up the value, and then you look to resell, or are you looking to keep that for the long term and refinance?
Yeah, so every business plan is different, but typically what we underwrite is we underwrite a 5-year hold period. So I'll give you an example. We'll go in, we'll purchase a 100-unit apartment community. What we really look for is we look for stabilized apartment communities, which means 90+% occupancy with a light value add component. We want to be able to spend maybe $4,000 or $5,000 per unit on renovations and jump the rents, let's say $100 to $150 per month. If we're successful in doing that, and it's only taken us 2 years to do that, we'll sell after 2 years once we've executed our business plan. If our business plan is not being fully executed yet and it takes 4 years, 5 years, we'll wait 4 years, 5 years. But we also keep in mind that when you're buying these apartment communities, there is prepayment penalties on commercial loans through like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. So we also account for that as well. So when we account for at time of sale what the prepayment penalty is going to be, really what's our net effective return. So whether, like one deal I'm involved in right now was purchased in Lawrence, Kansas back in September 2018. That's going to go back on the market in October of 2019 this year. Just a property that's been performing great. The rents have jumped up by like 15% without doing much renovations wise. So there's still really, really good additional value add upside for the next purchaser. And it's a property where the income's gone up and the cap rates have gone down. So it's kind of a perfect recipe to make, some good money on that. So that's going to be a deal that's only held for 15, 16 months at this point in time. But there's some other deals I'm in that might be held for 5-6 years. So every deal is different. It's kind of, you don't know what's going to happen until you go into it and the business plan starts getting executed. But the reason, it should be somewhat predictable is you do your due diligence up front. You see what the other communities are doing, in your area, right in, that 1 mile radius. Were there some recent trades? If there were, those owners are going to be going in and spending a ton of money too, trying to jump up rents. So it's a good thing when there's a lot of recent sales around you, because those owners, the way that they rationalize buying that is there's got to be some value add component. So you got to figure they're going to spend somewhere between $4,000 to $6,000 per unit and jump rents. Therefore, we'll be able to do the same.
So basically, similar to residential real estate, you kind of look at comps per se.
Yeah.
As far as this community was renting at $500, now they're at $750 each unit.
Yeah.
And this is doing basically the same thing. It's only half a mile away or something.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, to your point, exactly like doing a CMA as a realtor. So we do a CMA as a realtor, and we don't really necessarily 100% do a CMA as far as the purchase price, but we do it for rentals. So if we have 1 bedroom renting for $800 and our neighboring property, a competitor that's very, very similar, is renting for $900, we probably know there's a $100 built-in delta there. Where we can probably raise rents by $100 without doing much renovations. And then there's a building around the corner that their 1 bedroom's renting for $1,000 with these renovations. And for us to get to that quality, we have to spend, let's say, $4,000 per unit to do that. So that'll be, kind of baked into our business plan at that point in time too. But the unique thing about investment real estate is that everything's based off the income the property generates, the NOI in other words. So if the neighboring property just sold for $80,000 per unit, our property might sell for $85,000, even if they're identical, because we might have done some small little things you can't tell by looking at them. Even if they look identical, the units are identical, size are identical, things like that, we might have done some things like water conservation. And through water conservation, we put in low flow toilets, low flow shower heads, low flow aerators on sinks and things like that. And perhaps maybe that saved us $100,000 in water expense per year. And if you're in a 5% cap rate market, well, $100,000 divided by 5% is an additional value of $2 million. So that's one of the small things where these places look identical, but we use less water, and that water savings goes right to our bottom line. So that's why we don't necessarily always do a CMA per se when we're going to purchase,
Of course.
but we do this, the CMA on rental comps. That's where you can do it. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. So, kind of to go backward a little bit, how did you get involved with syndications? How did you learn about syndications? And what kind of got you involved in it?
Yeah, so I had a few years back, I had done some subdivisions, flips, buying holds. I was doing Airbnb actually. I had bought a condo in Hoboken and I had it on Airbnb, which was good money, but the way that I viewed it, I was consistently buying myself jobs. I was buying myself things that required a lot of work. So after doing that and making some good money doing that, and also making money from selling homes as well,
Yeah.
I said I really love investment real estate and I want to invest more and more in real estate, and what's the best way that I can go about doing that without having to put a whole ton of time and effort into it. So that's when I started getting more and more intentional about syndication. So syndication was something I had listened about, something I had taught about in class. Actually, we're required to teach a little bit on syndication as well. But what I did is I really started seeking out really, really good professional syndicators. So started seeing the deals they were doing, started learning about the returns they were producing and things like that, started learning more and more about the tax code and seeing how tax efficient it was for me as a full-time real estate professional to invest in real estate, and specifically, something that might be considered a buy and hold type of investment. So, long story short, I had reached out to a guy who was putting together a syndication. He was raising equity for it. He's like, I need investors, would you want to invest in this? I said, absolutely. So the first syndication I invested in, I put $100,000 into a deal in Texas, and the deal's been going great. That deal produces 8%, 9% cash on cash return right now, which is great to get 8 to 9% on your money every year, as far as distribute it to you.
Sure.
And then, the value of the property's gone up a ton as well. So on that property, his business plan is that he's gonna play. Essentially, it's the same thing as a refi. He's going to place a supplemental on that property and return us anywhere between like 60-70% of our equity that we've invested in that, while keeping us in that deal. Taking a lot of our risk out of the deal by our capital being in there, returning a lot of our capital, but keeping us involved in that deal, still producing. After he placed the supplemental on it, the cash on cash will probably go down to like 7-8%, but still, it's good because I've gotten 70,000 out of my 100,000 back already. So that's how I first started. My whole intention was I want to invest passively. I don't want to do any work. When you're investing passively, there's literally no work. You just find people putting them together and say, take my money.
Right.
And then as time has gone on and I've been invested in more and more and more deals, most recently syndicated a deal in Phoenix back in February. That was a 120 unit property.
Okay.
In Glendale, and so right outside of Phoenix, Glendale, which is where like the Arizona Cardinals play, as an example. So, and that deal's going great. We projected that we thought our 2 bedrooms would only rent for $925 a month. They're starting at $1,000 now, and our 3 bedrooms we thought would only wind up renting for like $1,060, and those are renting for upwards of $1,200 a month now. And we just acquired it back in February. And based on where like our income is right now, and also where the cap rates are in that market, that property's appreciated in value by like 30%, and it has not been that long. It's been like 6 months. We purchased it on almost 6 months to this day. We purchased it on February 22nd, 2019. So it's the property's producing great. Part of that is we have a really solid team between me and my 3 partners, as well as all of our passive investors who entrusted us with their hard-earned money as well.
Right.
And having a really, really good professional management team in place and a really good property manager, which is your biggest partner on the deal.
Key, right?
Yeah, that's they control the whole thing. So we have a property manager there. Her name's Maria, and she is incredible. She's amazing. So and that's huge for us.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So how many? So I'm assuming that this is you're part of the operators, the GP.
Yeah.
How many GP deal have you done so far?
That one, and there was another one. So in syndication, you have like general partners,
Right.
and you also have deals where you're like what's called a key principal on them, where you're technically a part of the general partnership, but you're not one of the people really like calling the shots or anything like that. So I'm a KP on one deal in Fort Worth, and I'm a GP on this deal in Phoenix.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So just for the audience to understand, KP, they basically help with getting the loan.
Correct.
Just so everyone's aware.
Yeah, so KP is a key principal. So when you're applying for these loans, lenders typically want to see 2 things. So the people who apply for these loans, they want to see your net worth equal to the outstanding loan balance typically,
Right.
and they want to see your post-closing liquidity typically be anywhere between 9 months to 12 months worth of mortgage payments, debt service, as they say.
Yeah.
So like let's say for example you're taking out a loan for $10 million. The people who sign on that loan have to have combined net worths of at least $10 million. And let's say on that loan, annual mortgage payments are going to be, throwing out random numbers, and let's say any loan is $100,000. They want to make sure that all the people who are doing that have post-closing liquidity of at least $100,000 as an example. Yeah, and you could figure any number for that. If the annual debt service was $1 million, they'd want to see post-closing liquidity of $1 million as an example. Yeah. What's great about these loans too is that most of them we take out through the agencies, Fannie and Freddie. It'll be a 10-year term, but a 30-year amortization schedule, which means it has a 10-year term, but you're paying it back as if you borrow the money over 30 years. And typically you could get like 2, 3, 4, 5 years worth of interest only, which when you get 2, 3, 4, 5 years worth of interest only payments, you're not paying the principal, so that increases your cash on cash return, your annual cash flow distribution, because we have less debt service payments to make.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So Kyle, just taking a step back, now most of the deals that you mentioned as far when it comes to syndication, it's usually like an 80-20 type of split, or maybe 70-30 with the general partners and the limited partners.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
Now in your expertise and what you've seen, let's say if you're looking to refinance, have you seen that the 70% or 80% partners stay on the stay in the deal once the refinance happens, or like what what do you typically see?
Yeah, they stay in the deal. So because when you purchase this, I guess the best way to explain it is that, it really is a partnership. So despite the fact that you might have had 3 general partners who went out and found the deal and everything, the limited partners are the big reason why the deal happened. You needed their investment for the deal to happen. So if we refinance, let's say the refinance proceeds were $1 million and it was like an 80-20 split. Well, 80% of that, $800,000 would go to limited partners, and then 20% of that, $200,000 would go to the general partners. Everybody still stays in the deal and everything. So yeah, you don't just like cut them out of the deal at that point in time. Yeah, their percentage of ownership is going to stay the same. It's just that they have less risk involved because they've gotten a decent chunk of their capital back.
So it doesn't matter what time period, but what was the biggest struggle you had in your real estate investing career?
So when I first started off, knowing what the hell to ask general partners before investing in one of their deals, I'm fortunate enough to have a base knowledge of what's a good deal versus what's a bad deal. But when I first started investing, I had never invested in a 100+ unit apartment community passively or actively for that matter. So I didn't know every little small detail to ask. And as time has gone on, I've developed a list of questions, kind of like a checklist of like somewhere between 15 and 20 questions, or things that I want to know about before investing in a deal, and things that, in my opinion, are telltale signs of whether it's going to be a good deal or a bad deal. So one of those, as an example, is before I invest with somebody, I think the number one thing you can ask them is kind of a 3-part question. What's the most recent deal you did? Can I see a copy of the webinar when you were raising equity for that deal? So this way I know what your projections were. And then can I see your most recent monthly report on that deal? Because I want to be able to compare the projections versus the actuals to see if they're like somebody who's like a rah-rah guy who's full of shit basically and is saying we're going to do all this, we're going to have a great deal, and then the deal falls on its face. So that's a good way to kind of have somebody put their money where their mouth is. I'm not going to sit up here and lie and say I've invested in all great deals. I've invested in one really horrible deal passively. So, but you learn a lot of lessons. Inevitably, I will wind up getting my money back that I invested on that deal, but there's no cash flow being distributed on that deal. But again, fortunately, I'm fortunate that early when I first started investing, I invested in that deal, and I learned a lot from it. And those are lessons that I use to take on the next properties that I invest in. Things that I look for, not only because I still passively invest. Things that I look for not only in passive investments, but also deals that I'm looking to syndicate myself as well. Yeah.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah. No, but it's also good, like that. Well, not good for your cash flow or anything, but it's good that you did that because I'm glad you mentioned it because a lot of the audience they might see all the successes. Like I could see you're very successful, like both as a broker, as a flipper, I'm assuming, and also now with syndication, but people don't realize that not everything goes as planned.
yeah, and the other thing is too, some people think that like flips are super easy, and they're not. There's a lot of variables that people don't account for. People just watch these TV shows and they're like, yeah, I could flip a house in New Jersey for $30,000 and make $300,000, and it just it doesn't work that way. So, but yeah, there is a lot more variables, and it's a lot tougher than people think. People just see what you started with, what you ended with, and the money that you made from it. They don't see everything that happened in between and all the problems that arose and things like that, and all the expenses that popped up that you were like, crap, I didn't think that was going to happen. I didn't think that I was going to go into this house and we were going to have cast iron pipes that that burst because the house wasn't lived in for X amount of years and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things that pop up for sure, and they're things that hopefully before you dive into them, you can hopefully somewhat account for them.
Of course.
Yeah.
So Kyle, just taking away from all those real estate topics, what's your favorite book or podcast that you listen to?
So my favorite podcast I listen to is the Old Capital Real Estate Investing podcast with Paul Peebles, Michael Becker, James Zhang, John Brickson. Really, really, really good podcast. Those guys are commercial lenders who predominantly lend on apartment communities. Michael Becker actually owns over 7,000 units as a GP. So he used to be a lender and now he's an owner. So he jokingly, they call him the mayor of Beckerville, because when you think about it, if you own 7,000 units and you have 3 people in each unit, you're housing over 20,000 people. That's bigger than a lot of towns. So That's a great podcast, really informational. They put out 2 episodes a week. One is called Ask Mike Mondays, which is like a quick 10-minute episode where they ask a quick question and he answers it. And then they do like one every Thursday typically, and that's going to be on a specific topic. It could be on anything from water conservation strategies, could be on acquiring apartment strategies, just basic stuff like that. Could be on like an update on like loans and stuff like that. But it's a really, really, really good podcast. And the best book I've ever read that related to real estate investing is called The Best Ever Apartment Syndication book by Joe Fairless. A lot of the stuff in that book I think is applicable not only to just syndication but all real estate investing, because when you're doing a syndication, you are going into an apartment complex. A lot of times you're doing renovations, so it goes over renovations. It goes everything from starting a syndication, goes everything from raising equity for deals, what to look out for in deals, what to look out for as a both GP, general partner, who's putting together the syndication, and also the LP, the person who's just handing their money over too. That's a really, really good book. I can't stress that book enough. I think that book, it's $50, but with that being said, it's a $50 book, which I know is a little more expensive for a book, but I make no exaggeration when I say that. That $50 book probably has enough jam-packed content that its value probably has $10,000 at least worth of educational content, because there's education programs that'll charge you $10,000 for the same education that he teaches in that book. Joe has a great podcast too called the Best Ever Real Estate Investing Podcast, I think.
Right.
Or Best
Every
Ever
day.
something podcast. But it's
it
good.
every
He does
day.
it every single day, and that's good. I actually have a call with Joe at 3:30 today. So
Oh, nice.
yeah. So. But yeah, it's a really good, really, really, really good book. If you could read one book on real estate investing, I would probably read that book, Best Ever Apartment Syndication book.
Okay.
So I was going to ask, how can people find you on social media?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, best way to reach me, I'm most active on Facebook. Just Kyle Kovats is my name, so you just type it in on Facebook, Kyle Kovats. My email is very easy too, kylekovats@gmail.com. I'm a pretty simple person. So yeah, just Kyle Kovats on Facebook and kylekovats@gmail.com. Those are the best ways to reach me.
Okay. And my last question is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten in real estate?
Best piece of advice I've ever gotten in real estate is screw it, just do it, honestly. I forget who told me that, but I was at a real estate conference once, and they had, not even a conference, it was kind of like a small seminar, and they said screw it, just do it, and what they meant by that was, try a whole bunch of different stuff, and what works, stick with it, what doesn't work, don't stick with it, and I've kind of lived by that. So when I first got into the real estate business, prospecting-wise, I was going door-to-door making cold calls all day, and I'm still making cold calls. I don't go door-to-door as much because I just don't have as much time anymore, but I would go door-to-door. When I first started, I'd wear a suit, a tie, I'd bring a briefcase and stuff. I would knock on doors, and I'd get everything from, we're Catholic, we're not interested in your religion. I'm like, well, I'm not really here for a religious thing. I'm here because, I want to see if you're interested in selling your home. I got everything from just walk, we're not interested. What are you selling? And I'm like, I'm not selling anything. I just want to know if you know any neighbors looking to sell their home. So, and as time went on, I was like, I'd also ring the doorbell and stand right next to the door. And people were like probably afraid I was going to run in their house. So as time went on, I started dressing down more casually, just wearing like a collared shirt and jeans, and ring their doorbell, bring nothing with me, just keep business cards in my pocket. They'd answer the door with a real curious look, like, why is this random guy at my door? I wouldn't even introduce myself. I'd get right into it. I'd say, hey, by any chance, you know anybody looking to sell their home in this neighborhood? And sometimes they'll just tell you straight up, we're interested actually. Why do you ask? I'm working with some buyers right now who want to get into this neighborhood. Wanted to see if you might know anybody, but if you're interested, maybe we can talk. When are you looking to move? We're looking to move within actually 2 months. Oh, have you guys started the process of interviewing realtors yet? No, not really. Do you guys know where you're moving to yet? Yeah, we have a shore house down the shore. Oh, damn, I have a super hot lead now. I have somebody who already has somewhere to move to, and they want to move in 2 months, and they want to move because it's April, and they want to be out by the time that July hits. Oh, perfect. So, but yeah, I started just getting way more casual at things, and rather than try to be this, buttoned up suit, just be real, with people, basically. And, by doing so, you just learn that from over time. You try to start off, and it's just like, at first you're like, I gotta be this super professional. I think, younger people also feel the need to look super buttoned up and professional. And reality is people appreciate, you know, you being real with them, you know, and you just being, it's refreshing because they're so used to seeing a whole bunch of, I say there's bullshit tours and real tours. So I want to be a real tour, not a bullshit tour, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think I have any more questions.
No, I'm pretty good.
So, all right.
Yeah, thank you guys. I
you. Well,
appreciate
thank
it.
you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
absolutely.
for taking the time and educating us a little.
Yeah, my pleasure, my pleasure. Thank you guys.
Thanks again, Kyle. I really appreciate the talk. So, everyone, please remember to like, subscribe, comment. Any feedback for the podcast or the YouTube channel is definitely appreciated.
If you guys have any suggestions for future guests that you guys want to see, let us know. Thank you.